Alrighty, welcome everybody back to the channel. If you don't know who I am by now, my name is David. I also go by Miller Football, and today we're going to be continuing my series where I'm talking about all 32 teams and what they've done during free agency, the first week, stage, wave, whatever you want to call it. The most important part of free agency is over, so I'm going through division by division, grading each team based upon their additions, their losses, and their retentions. Before we jump into this, keep in mind that when I'm recording these, I'm dealing with a stuffy nose and some allergy symptoms. So if I sound a little bit off, I do apologize, but I'm working my ass off to try to get these done because people said they wanted them broken up into, a division by division breakdown instead of two big videos, one big video, whatever. So we're working. These are going to be my primary uploads over the next couple days. But with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into it. Kicking us off with the Atlanta Falcons, this is a team that was in for a sneakily important offseason. Many people, including myself, and I say many people, maybe it was just my circles last year, really thought the Atlanta Falcons had the chance to shock the world. A couple of us were somewhat confident in Desmond Ridder at least being a game manager type quarterback. He wasn't that, and Arthur Smith did what Arthur Smith did. So you go into this offseason, you are a wide receiver 2, a quarterback, and a competent play caller away from having a really stacked offense, and you already had a top 10 defense. So what did they go out and do? Well, they hire Zach Robinson to be their offensive coordinator. He comes over with Raheem Morris. So you've got two amazing young offensive and defensive minds in the building, going to be running ship. You go out, you get Kirk Cousins, sign him to a 4-year, $180 million deal, and you go out and sign Darnell Mooney, who we'll talk about in a moment. But kind of starting out with Kirk here, as he is the big signing, I can tell you right now with full confidence, Kirk is the second best quarterback that is suited up for the Atlanta Falcons in my lifetime. I've been on this planet 21 years, and the only quarterback that is any better than Kirk that they have had in those 21 years is Matt Ryan. I know Kirk's coming off an ACL, or not an ACL tear, excuse me, an Achilles tear. I don't care. He's not a mobile quarterback. He is one of the smartest pocket passing quarterbacks in the league. He's coming off of what was going to be the best season of his career. He was playing the best football he's ever played before he got hurt last year. And I know a lot of people like to point at, the weapons the Vikings had around him and Kevin O'Connell, and they like to say, well, Kirk Cousins was a situation merchant, right? He was only good because of his situation. Well, now he's walking into a situation that has Drake London and Darnell Mooney, which sure, neither of them are Justin Jefferson, but they are both damn good receivers in their own right. You have Rondale Moore, who's a really good slot, gadgety type receiver. You're going to have an amazing run game with Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. You have a really good offensive line, and you have Kyle Pitts, who is finally going to be unlocked, all being coached by Zach Robinson. That is a damn good offense. Might not have as much, quote-unquote, superstar power as what Minnesota had, but Kirk Cousins has the potential to turn it into that type of offense, which is really, really exciting. So I think that is a massive move for them. And then, like I said, the other big move, you bring in Darnell Mooney, 3-year, $39 million deal, $26 million guaranteed. As a Chicago Bears fan, Mooney is one of the more underrated and disrespected players in the league. I will not lie, I was part of that throughout the season because I was one of those people that was really holding on to Justin Fields. And that's where this kind of underrating of Darnell Mooney comes from, is people trying to be like, well, Justin Fields really didn't have a whole lot going for him. Well, last year he had DJ Moore, he had Cole Kmet, both top 10 at their position, and he had Darnell Mooney, and Mooney and Fields just didn't really have that great of a rapport, which really hurt Mooney. He was getting open, he was playing good football, he just wasn't getting targeted. He wasn't, Fields' guy last year. He was like the third, almost fourth option in our offense because it just felt like Fields was never looking his way. Now you have Kirk, who's one of the best quarterbacks at processing a defense, getting through his progressions, finding guys that are getting themselves open, and Darnell Mooney is one of the better separators in the league. So I'm really excited to see what this pairing is going to do. He complements Drake London perfectly. London's your big body X. Mooney's more of your movable Z receiver, and then Rondale Moore's in the slot, which that's another great move. Trading Desmond Ridder, who, with all due respect, is not a starting caliber quarterback in the NFL, for a player who can be a legitimate chess piece for your offense is huge. Sure, the Cardinals were trying to move guys around. They're trying to keep around Greg Dortch, which, great for them. Not saying that it's a bad thing. But Rondale Moore kind of became the odd man out. They wanted to get a quarterback that could back up Kyler because Kyler's had his injury history, whatever. This is a great move for the Falcons. I absolutely love that. So those three big moves, big moves. A very underrated move for the Falcons is going to be adding Charlie Werner from the San Francisco 49ers. 3-year, $12 million deal. They lose Jonnu Smith, so you need a tight end 2 behind Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts is not like a traditional tight end. You know, he's not somebody that's going to be up on the line of scrimmage blocking against the run. He's more of just one of those offensive weapon types. Charlie Werner is the complete opposite. He is your traditional inline tight end, was a great backup to George Kittle in San Francisco. He did a lot of the dirty work. And the Falcons just need somebody who's going to do that. Werner fits that role perfectly. He's not a big pass catcher. He only has 120 career receiving yards over 4 years, but he has high block win rates, 86.7% pass block win rate, and a 77.5% run block win rate. Goodness, try saying that one 5 times fast throughout his career. So he's a really nice add to do some of the nitty gritty stuff. Plus, he's a more than capable special teams player. So that's a really good move. The other player I have quote unquote highlighted here, you know, I highlight players by making them the 5 main ones that get pictures, is Kentavious Street, who gets a 1-year deal. And I'm not highlighting him because he's some superstar. It's more of an inside joke on the channel. You know, at the trade deadline, I said it was a good move for the Falcons to go out and get Street. Like, he played in 5 games. He had a sack. He had a fumble, you know, or forced a fumble. Like, he was solid last year. He's a good rotational defensive lineman. Ran a sub 5-second 40-yard dash. I just put him in here because, you know, there's a little joke when I was talking about the trades. So for the Kentavious Street fandom out there, stand up, rise up. Let me know down in the comments below if you're a true Kentavious Street fan. But the other moves they made, they bring back Kadarrell Hodge, who's a really solid special teamer. I don't have the information on his contract in front of me. I would assume it's a 1-year deal. He's not as much of a receiver. He's more of a special teamer, like I said, but the best years of his career have been with the Atlanta Falcons. Another special teamer they actually brought in is Ray McLeod, who is getting a 2-year deal worth up to $6 million. And, you know, he brings a real element of speed to your offense, right? He has 90 catches for 768 yards, and a touchdown in his career. But more importantly, he's averaging just under 10 yards per punt return in his career and just under 23 yards per kick return in his career. And considering you lose Cordero Patterson and they updated the kickoff rules, having a guy like that certainly can't hurt. A couple other guys they retain. Ryan Newsel, I believe is how you say his name. Sure, he's somebody that your offensive line coach is a big fan of and has really, you know, developed in Atlanta into a solid rotational player. It's a 1-year deal, so, you know, there's no risk or anything involved. And then Storm Norton, he came in last year, started a couple games when Kaleb McGary went down. He's not great, but he's definitely a capable swing tackle, so, you know, sure, right? Nothing negative to be pulled away there. And then the other big name, Nate Landman, also Liam McCullough, which is what I was trying to say. I was trying to say both names at the same time there. Liam McCullough, you bring him back, your long snapper, always good to keep around your special teams players. And Nate Landman, kind of the same thing. He had a bit of a breakout year last year, played in 16 games, started 14, had 110 tackles, 7 TFLs, 3 forced fumbles, 2 sacks, and an interception. So keeping around a depth linebacker that can do a little bit of work on special teams is always a great thing as well. And then taking a look at the losses, there's not a lot of stuff here that's really, you know, going to make or break your team. You know, we already talked about Desmond Ridder and Cordero Patterson. Both moves you can definitely stomach. Van Jefferson and Mac Hollins, sure, they were solid receivers, but you replace them with Darnell Mooney, Rondale Moore, Ray McLeod. Like, I think you'll live. I think you'll be able to survive and fight another day without those guys. Matt Hennessy, good swing guard / center, but you can live without him. Then on defense, Calais Campbell, Bud Dupree, Jeff Okudah, all guys that I would say are big names. You know, they have name value, but Okudah, he's never really caught on. He played some solid football for Atlanta, but you can live without him. Calais Campbell, he's on his last legs. I'm shocked he's still in the league. And then Bud Dupree, just a rotational edge rusher. you're in prime position to take an edge rusher who can probably be better than Bud Dupree when he steps on the field at pick 8. So I don't think that's a big deal. The only loss here that really sticks out to me, and I think, as much as I hate to say it, it's just a reflection of what the new offense is going to be in Atlanta, is Keith Smith. He was an invaluable part of Arthur Smith's offense, being a really, really good run and pass blocker. And, you know, he was a really good special teamer, obviously. Got in a little bit of trouble on special teams, you know, with illegal hits and whatnot. But when you have somebody coming over from the McVay side of that Shanahan tree, you know, there's the two main pillars, the McVays and the Shanahans. McVay, more spread out, doesn't use a fullback. Shanahan, very fullback reliant, brings everything in. And that's kind of the shift here, right? Arthur Smith was more in that Shanahanian vein, so he had Keith Smith. He liked to use Keith Smith. Zach Robinson probably won't be using a fullback, unfortunately, as much as I hate to say it. But, you know, maybe we see Charlie Werner step in and play like a pseudo fullback role. He did a little bit of that as like a backup for Kyle Juszczyk in San Francisco, so maybe we see something there. I don't know, you know me, I'm just trying to make sure every team has a fullback. But as a whole, looking at what the Falcons did here, I gotta give them an A. This is an awesome, awesome free agency haul. Really, really like getting Kirk Cousins, Darnell Mooney, Rondale Moore, and Charlie Werner for your offense. Keeping around some solid depth and rotational players, so can't complain here. I think they did a great job, and the future is, well, the next year, the year after, the immediate future, so to speak, in Atlanta is certainly bright. Moving over to the Carolina Panthers, their goal this offseason was incredibly clear. You go out, you get Bryce Young help. This is a quarterback that had very little help his rookie season. He was the number 1 overall pick and struggled because of that lack of help. So one of the first big moves you go out and do is you go out and you trade for Deontay Johnson. You give up Dante Jackson, who is quite honestly washed at this point in his career, not doing a whole lot. So getting Deontay Johnson for him is a total steal. And Deontay Johnson just adds something to your offense you didn't have last year. You had, who was Adam Thielen was your number 1 receiver, right? The husk of Adam Thielen, who is a slot receiver. You didn't have a legitimate separator for Bryce Young to move the ball downfield. That's exactly what Deontay Johnson is. Now, I get it. Some people are going to look at this and question whether or not Deontay Johnson's heart's still in the game, because there were some moments last year in Pittsburgh where he just very clearly was not trying. But when you're in Pittsburgh and your quarterback is Kenny Pickett and your offensive coordinator is Matt Canada and whoever they replaced him with that was equally as bad, and I can't remember the name of off the top of my head, I understand it, right? To a certain degree, I understand it. Deontay Johnson is a player that has really been shafted by poor quarterback play throughout most of his career. So at a certain point, you hit your breaking point, and I get it. Moving on to Bryce Young, like, that's a big upgrade over Kenny Pickett. There's a reason why Bryce Young was the number 1 pick, and Kenny Pickett's backing up Jalen Hurts, going into his 3rd year. Like, it's not complicated, right? It's a pretty easy connection to make to understand why Deontay Johnson was so frustrated. So I like that move a lot. And then the other 2 big moves you make on offense, both in terms of impact and sheer size, are adding Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis onto your offensive line. Robert Hunt, one of the best interior linemen in the game at this point, gets a 5-year, $100 million contract with $63 million guaranteed. Last year, Bryce Young was sacked 62 times. That was 2nd in the NFL, which is unacceptable, especially when you consider the fact that Bryce Young is so small. When he's that small and he's getting hit that often, eventually injuries are going to start to pop up, right? So you want to make sure you're investing somewhere on the offensive line. You already have your tackles figured out with Taylor Moton and Nicky Ekwonu, so the next step is to go for the interior. You go out, you get one of the best guards in the sport in Robert Hunt, like I said. Dude's 6'6", 330 pounds. He's allowed 12 career sacks in 3,316 snaps. He has a 90.9% pass block win rate over the course of his career, and he's a stud in the run game, right? So Robert Hunt is a massive, massive addition for this team, once again, both in terms of impact and size. And then Damian Lewis, not quite as good as Robert Hunt, but he's still damn good in his own right. He gets a 4-year, $53 million contract with $26.2 million guaranteed. he played his best football blocking for Geno Smith, and, you know, that's what he's coming out of, right? Now, sure, you can look at it and say, well, you're shelling out potentially $153 million to two interior offensive linemen. Who cares? When you have your tackles already, you put your money somewhere to make sure your quarterback stays upright. Lewis has, allowed 3 sacks on 931 snaps this past season. He had a 97.2% pass block efficiency rating last year. 2 awesome guards coming in alongside Deontay Johnson to really give this offense a boost. Now, you got to hope the run game takes a step up, which, granted, Chuba Hubbard has shown that he's a competent back. Maybe you want to add someone back there. Maybe you hope Miles Sanders steps up a little bit. We'll have to see what the plan is there. And then in the receiver room, you're really hoping Jonathan Mingo can step up, because he adds something to that room you just don't have. Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen, both on the smaller side. Neither one's a true big body downfield threat. You're kind of hoping that Mingo can become that. And I like Mingo, so I'm confident, or I'm going to have confidence in him that he can do that. Now, on the defensive side of the ball, the big additions you make, first of all, the most recent one is you give Jadeveon Clowney a 2-year, $20 million contract that can be worth up to $24 million. I get it. He's 31 and he's no Brian Burns, but he's coming home. You know, this is a hometown guy. He's coming off one of the best years of his career in Baltimore. We'll call it that. He was a major part of that Ravens defense that was the best in the league last year. And yeah, some of that was due to scheme, but you're not bringing Clowney in to be an every down pass rusher. You're not bringing him in to be Brian Burns. You're bringing him in to be a good run defender and a, you know, rotational pass rusher that is going to help out, right? It's a good move. And then the other 2 big defensive moves, the 2 that I get a little more excited about, you had A'Shawn Robinson coming over from the Giants. This is somebody that has experience with your defensive coordinator, Evero. He gets a 3-year, $22.5 million deal. He's the perfect fit opposite, of Derek Brown, which is incredible. You know, he knows the system. He's a great run defender. It's going to allow Derek Brown to really explore his pass rushing ability a little bit more, which we have seen him tap into and be really good at, given, you know, his role and his size. So I love that move. And then Josie Jewell gets a 3-year, $22.75 million contract. Another guy that is experienced with Vero, this time with his stint in Denver. So it'll be interesting to see how he can kind of take over for Frankie Luvu. You know, he's another guy that's going to have some big shoes to fill. Frankie Luvu leaving for Washington stings a lot. I'm a big Luvu guy, but, you know, Jewell's definitely competent. He is a very, very competent, above average linebacker. You're paying him as such. And he's not expensive as Luvu. Sure, he's almost 30. I think he's going to play 29 this year. So a little bit on the older side, but you can stomach it. You can live with it. You're cool with it. And then the other big not the other big, but just running through their other offensive moves. Raheem Blackshear, you bring him back, solid rotational running back. David Moore, he had like 5 games last year where he was just due for a big play. You know, the whole I woke up angry and then he'd go make a big play. And maybe Carolina can recapture that magic. You know, they got another D Moore in the building. I know it's not the same, but you know what? Optimism, right? Let's be a little bit optimistic. You bring back Amir Smith-Marset, who was a solid punt returner last year. You get Josh Neiman over from the Packers, who's a good swing tackle. Not going to expect him to start. Then I have J.J. Jansen listed here on the offensive side, just because I didn't have room on the other side, but bringing him up, it's always good to keep around your long snapper. Always good to keep your special teams intact, because as we all know, special teams is one of the most underrated aspects of the sport that we all love called football. We already talked about Clowney. Other edge rushers, you bring in DJ Wanham on a 2-year, $12.5 million contracts. This is an interesting move. He's only 26. He's coming off an 8-sack, 38 pressure season before being put on IR in, week 16. He had 8 sacks in 2021. There's a lot of jokes about Wanham, specifically from NFC North fans. You know, if you're a Panthers fan, you probably don't know about these, but as a Bears fan, I see it a lot. Most of DJ Wanham's production over the past 2 years has come playing against Justin Fields. And that's not a joke. I think he had 4 sacks on Fields last year, something stupid. So maybe there's not so much legitimacy to those statistics, but Wanham's certainly a capable rotational edge, and that's what you're bringing him in to be. I think he can definitely be a good third, fourth guy for you here. And then Kayvon Chason gets a 1 year deal worth up to $5 million. He's not great. This is a very much a prove it contract. You're trying to see what you can't get out of him. He was a first round pick in 2020, obviously. He has 5 sacks since then, 11 starts in 57 career games. But he has experience with Todd Walsh, who's your defensive line coach now. He played his rookie year under him. So we'll have to see. Maybe they can get some untapped potential there. And if they don't, the cheap fly or prove it deal, so be it. In the secondary here, you bring back Troy Hill for a year. He's going to be your nickel this year. He was really good last year as your nickel. Started in 16 games, 48 tackles. Sure, he's not the best in the world, but he's a cheap option there, and he's capable. And cheap and capable is always great. And then also in the secondary here, Dane Jackson gets a 2-year, $14.5 million contract. Only started 28 games in Buffalo, but he was productive in those 28 games. 152 tackles, 28 pass breakups, 3 picks. And then in 2022, the year he started, he had 58 tackles, 2 picks, 12 pass breakups, and 14 starts. So we'll have to see if there's not something there. At worst, he's a really good rotational corner. So we'll have to see if there's not a lane for him to kind of take over here. And then moving over to the safeties here, I forgot to write this one down, but Jordan Fuller gets a 1-year deal. He's a playmaker. He had 3 interceptions, 8 pass deflections, and 3 forced fumbles last year. So that'll be fun. Good safety that can come in and make a play for you. Nick Scott gets a 1-year deal. He is somebody that played under Avero in Los Angeles, so more familiarity there. Always great to have that. And then also Sam Franklin Jr., who I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I'm an expert on. I know very little about him, but it's always good to retain talent. Always good to retain your guys, so I can't get mad there. Looking at some of the losses here, DJ Chark, Laviska Shenault, you can live with that. I think you can be okay with that. Hayden Hurst, another guy, I think you'll survive. Giovanni Ricci, who I have listed as tight end / quote unquote fullback. He played fullback for Carolina for a little bit, but he's the worst fullback I've watched, with all due respect. He's much better as a tight end. And that's what he got signed to play in, I want to say Cleveland. He's going to be their 3rd tight end. That's his role. That's his job. Good for him for finding that, right? No hate to Giovanni Ricci. He's just not very good at playing fullback, so I think you'll be able to stomach losing him. Bradley Bozeman, Gabe Jackson, they're both gone. As of right now, your starting center is Austin Corbett, so you'll live. And then Gabe Jackson, obviously Damian Lewis and Robert Hunter are going to replace him. On defense, this is where the big losses are. Mainly Brian Burns, Frankie Louvu, and Jeremy Chin and Von Bell. It's hard to say Carolina distinctively upgraded in any of those spots at edge, linebacker, or safety. So that's tough. It's definitely tough. And then the other guys here, Yeturgos Matos, he's in San Francisco now. They're a D-line factory. Maybe they can get something out of him, but losing him isn't a big deal. Camus Grugier-Hill, losing him, also not a big deal. Solid depth linebacker, but you'll survive. And then Shaq Griffin, whatever, right? So as a whole, this is a really, really hard team to grade for because they made all the right moves offensively. Deontay Johnson, Robert Hunt, Damian Lewis, those are 3 massive moves that put your offense in a substantially better situation than it was in last year. But when you lose so much talent on defense, it's really hard to balance out. Right, so I'm going to play it safe. I'm going to play it in the middle. I'm going to give the Panthers a C+. Just know if they had kept Brian Burns in some way, even if it was a tag, this would be like an A-. Right, sure, you get a 2nd round pick for Brian Burns. That's nothing. That's one of the 10 best edge rushers in the sport. 2nd round pick's not a whole lot. So it's tough. You lose a lot of talent defensively. I'm sure Avero will be fine. I'm sure he'll find a way to make it work because that's what he does. But I'm not grading off of how I think they will project. I'm grading off of the moves themselves. And just looking at losing Brian Burns, Frankie Louvu, Jeremy Chin, and Von Bell, and not replacing them with anybody that is of equal talent or really even close. Well, I guess in the Frankie Louvu, Josie Jewell case, it's kind of close. But otherwise, it's not particularly close. So it's hard to give them much higher than a C+ here. Moving over to the New Orleans Saints, I am incredibly grateful for this team, not because I actually care, but because they hardly did anything in free agency, which means I don't have to talk about them for as long, which means less work for me in the long run. That sounded kind of lazy, but I don't care. It's genuinely how I'm feeling right now. So let's go ahead, not waste any more time, jump into it. Chase Young, your big deal, 1 year, $13 million, fully guaranteed. Sure. Pass rushers they don't come cheap in free agency, especially not ones who have big names. I was going to say high profile, but I don't think Chase Young's quite deserving of that mantle right now in his career. Sure, he was rookie of the year. His best career season is 7.5 sacks. He hasn't been a consistent player. There's some questions about his reliability and effort in run defense. So I'm not going to say I'm moved, but I do like this as a spot for Chase Young because, number one, it's going to take some of the load off of Cam Jordan, which is always great. He's not getting any younger. You want to make sure that he can get as much breathing time as he needs in his ripe old age. And on top of that, if anyone's going to kind of kick that I don't want to defend the run out of Chase Young that we saw last year towards the end of the year with the 49ers. And, there's been some rumors and some questions, specifically at the trade deadline, swirling about his presence in the locker room and his willingness to work with coaches and all that. If there's anyone that's going to work all of that out of him, it's Cam Jordan. Cam Jordan will whip him into shape, get him straightened out. He's one of the more respected defensive linemen in the league, has been in the league forever, knows what's up. I like that pairing quite a bit in a mentor-mentee role. I think that's really good for the Saints. And then the other big defensive move they made, they bring in Willie Gay, who is an incredibly solid linebacker. 1 year deal worth $5 million. You lose Zach Bond. You don't have a lot of depth at linebacker, so now you've got Willie Gay, Demario Davis, and Pete Werner, which is one hell of a linebacker trio. Let me tell you, that is a fantastic core right there. Gay might be the worst of the three, but that's not saying a whole lot, considering Pete Werner and Demario Davis are both damn good ball players. So you love to see that. Offensively, they bring in Cedric Wilson Jr. from the Dolphins. He gets a 2-year deal. Sure, this receiver room is getting pretty young, especially with Michael Thomas, now being gone. So you bring in somebody who's been in the league for a couple years. He is a solid third, fourth option. We'll have to see how he meshes in with this offense. I'd like to see them give A.T. Perry the edge over him because he had some really solid, flashes last year. You invested a draft pick in him. I think he can be a good receiver. We'll have to see because they're kind of similar in how they play. So it'll be interesting to see how they mesh. You also bring in Nathan Peterman. Sure, he gets a 1-year deal to be a backup quarterback. He's capable of being a backup quarterback. And then the most important move you make offensively, obviously, is keeping around Adam Prentice, who I know you did the whole Kalen Saunders at fullback thing. No one cares. It's not real. It's stupid. It's fake. Putting a defensive lineman at fullback is sacrilegious and should result in a coach being executed on site. Adam Prentice is more than capable as a blocker and as a runner. We saw a little bit of that last year. So I'm glad to see the Saints keeping him around. I also put Tyrann Mathieu on here because they gave him an extension. Usually I'm not including the extensions in these, but considering the Saints did nothing, they add in Stanley Morgan, Oli Udoh, who, sure, and then they keep Ugo Amadi. I had to throw something else in here, right? I had to give them credit for something else, and you know what? It's good to see Cole Kmet's son getting paid, right? I can't complain about that. Looking at their losses, the only names that jump out to me, really, are Zach Bond. Like, Jameis Winston isn't good. I'm sorry. You get a creep out of the building. That's great. Lynn Bowden, he's a good gadgety player, whatever, you can survive without him. Michael Thomas isn't good anymore. Jimmy Graham is probably going to retire. I know he had some fun plays for the Saints last year, and I loved seeing that, but eventually you got to learn to hang it up. Andres Pete, he's solid, but there's a reason the Saints let him go. Malcolm Roach, kind of the same deal. Zach Bond, he's a really solid linebacker, but you replace him with Willie Gay, so you'll live. Lonnie Johnson, Isaac Yiadom, solid rotational depth corners, but I really like the Saints secondary, so they'll be able to survive there. And then Marcus May, I mean, big name, but not a lot of big impact as of late. So as a whole, I don't know how to grade this. Like, sure, they made a couple solid moves, but it's the Saints, so they're never going to have a lot of money. They're never going to be able to do a whole lot. I'm just going to give it a C. I think they did fine. They don't do anything here that I think pushes them closer to contention. I don't think they do anything here that pushes them closer to even contention for the division. They're just kind of filling out the roster with some flyer deals, keeping around guys like Prentice and Tyrann Mathieu, and sure, whatever, right? It was a good offseason given that they had no money, but when you have no money, you're not going to be able to do a whole lot. So I think this is like textbook average C, bordering on a C plus type of behavior. Can't complain. That isn't a slight at the Saints. It's just not a whole lot to get excited about, and I suppose not a whole lot to get upset about either. And finally, closing out with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, this offseason was all about keeping around their talent. They had 6 names that were slated to hit free agency that were big names for this team, and they kept around the 4 most important ones. No offense to Shaq Barrett, all offense to Devin White, they're just not as important as these other 4. So the first one, the most important, maybe not the most talented name here, but the most important is Mike Evans. He gets a 2-year, $52 million contract that includes $35 million guaranteed, because of course he did. He was supposed to stay in Tampa. I know there were people joking and, speculating that he was going to follow Dave Canales, go to Carolina. That would have been wrong. That would have been gross. It would have been disgusting, and I would have hated it. I'm really glad that didn't happen, because Mike Evans is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for me. As someone who was grown up watching football through the 2010s and into the 2020s, he is synonymous with that skull, football, and flag logo that represents the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. There are 2 players that come to mind when I think of the Buccaneers. It's Mike Evans and Mike Alstott, a pair of Mikes. And even as someone who is a fullback aficionado, Mike Evans comes to mind a little bit more because I actually got to watch him play live. That being said, this is an incredible move. You're keeping him around for relatively cheap, given what he brings to the table. He just turned 30, had another 1,000-yard season, because of course he did. Led the league in touchdowns with 13, first time he's ever done that in his career. And he built up an incredible rapport with Baker Mayfield, who you just gave a triple-digit contract, or a triple-digit, yeah, 9-figure contract to. Triple-digit in terms of how many millions, but a 9-figure contract is what Baker Mayfield got. We'll go ahead and jump over to him. He gets a 3-year, $100 million deal, which is really a 2-year, $60 million deal with a 3rd year that's a void year, where if he plays for Tampa Bay, he gets $40 million. If he doesn't, they eat a little bit of dead cap. So it's a good contract, all things considered. And I will say, Baker Mayfield, this contract can turn out really good for Tampa Bay if he continues to play at the level he was playing last year. If he regresses because Dave Canales is gone, which is not a guarantee, but is certainly possible, this could age poorly. However, I don't think that'll happen. I think Baker has finally found his groove. He's finally found his home. He's found his team. I think Baker is the guy for Tampa for now. He's still, in his late 20s. It's not like he's going to retire after this contract's up. But I like this move a lot for Tampa too. Making sure you keep around your quarterback, a guy who is the best quarterback you've had since Tom Brady, and would have been better than a lot of the quarterbacks you had right before Tom Brady. So keeping those 2 around, keeping your dynamic duo on offense around, and then you still have Chris Godwin and K. Dotton and Rashad White, and your improving offensive line. Tampa Bay's offense is in a great spot. Sure, they lost Dave Canales. I think they'll be okay. The other big move they make is they retain Lavonte David, give him a 1 year worth up to $10 million. He might be 34, but that man has not shown any signs of regression. He was substantially better than Devin White. They made the right decision in terms of which linebacker to keep around. He is great all around. He can blitz, he can cover, he can stop the run. There's very few linebackers who are elite at all aspects of playing linebacker in the NFL. Nowadays, a lot of linebackers are specialists, so to speak, right? Think Roquan Smith. He's a coverage specialist. The guy next to him, Pat Queen, he's a run defense specialist. The only true all-around, superstar linebackers in the league that are great at everything are Fred Warner and Lavonte David. Now, is Lavonte David as good as Fred Warner? No, but they're both incredible. And also, I got to throw my boy Tremaine Edmonds in there because he's starting to get to that level, but he's not quite there yet. Other guys, look at Demario Davis. He's more of a coverage guy. A guy like TJ Edwards, he's more of a run defense guy. It's very rare nowadays to have a linebacker who can do it all, and Lavonte David truly can, even though he's 34 years old. So, great move there. And you give Antoine Winfield Jr. the franchise tag. A little bummed out they couldn't get something long-term done with him, but he is one of the best safeties in the sport pretty easily, so I think you can stomach the price tag that comes with the franchise tag. Nothing too dramatic there. You also bring back Jordan Whitehead. He had a little stint with the Jets. He's coming back on a 2-year deal for $9 million, worth up to $10.5 million, which is great. You know, he's someone they were really high on. They couldn't bring him back because of the Tom Brady contract. So you have someone that is really good in the box. He's an exceptionally hard hitter. He can play high and low. He's solid in coverage. He's coming off a career high in interceptions from last year. That's a really good move to pair with Antoine Winfield Jr., right? You can play a lot with Winfield as your single high safety, bring Whitehead up into the box alongside Lavonte David and probably Servakia Dennis as your other middle linebacker, who I'm a big fan of. I love that I'm really hoping that he's their answer to replace Devin White. I hope they decide to go that route. Other names here, you retain John Wolford, Chase Edmonds, Devin Tompkins, and Justin School, not familiar with his game, you'll have to excuse me, and Brandon Walton. Wolford knows your offense. Well, I guess now your offense might be changing a little bit with Canales gone, so I don't know how much that matters, but he's familiar with the roster. So, good backup quarterback. Chase Edmonds, solid rotational running back. Devin Tompkins, sure. Brandon Walton and School. Justin, over here, sure. They also add in Sua Opeta and Ben Bredesen, two really solid interior offensive linemen. I'm not sure how, of what their role is projected to be. Sua Opeta is probably more of a backup. He's only started in 10 of his 38 career games. He started in 6 games last year. You lose Matt Filer. This is probably your Matt Filer replacement, and Bredesen might start. Defensive side of the ball, you bring back Greg Gaines, who gets a 1-year, $3.5 million deal. He's really solid and has proven to be a really good space eater, right? He opens up guys like Vita Vea and Kalijah Cansey, and with Vita Vea kind of getting up there in age and starting to wear down a little bit, it's good to have another guy on the roster that can handle that. Two moves that I'm excited to see how they'll play out for them is the 2 DBs they added in Tavierre Thomas and Bryce Hall. Thomas is someone who I've really liked. He kind of not fell off, but took a step back last year in Houston. I'm hoping that's just because he was adjusting to a new defense and just couldn't find his footing. But in 2021, 2022, he was one of the best nickel corners in the league. So we'll have to see how he produces for Tampa, see what kind of role he kind of plugs himself into. And then Bryce Hall, I think he is a very solid corner. You trade away Carlton Davis, and Zion McCollum's probably going to step up, so maybe he steps more into Zion McCollum's role, which would have him as a starter. But he's a solid DB nonetheless. No one that's anything too crazy, but he's good depth, if nothing else, and has the upside to be a solid starter. We'll see how that plays out. You also keep around Chase McLaughlin, so always good to keep around your special teamers. I keep saying that throughout the series. You always want to keep around your special teamers when they're good, and Chase McLaughlin is definitely good. And then in terms of losses, I already brought up Shaq Barrett and Devin White. I think those are both stomachable. This is a really good edge class. You have a pick in the late 20s, you can absolutely replace Shaq Barrett. It's not a big deal. And Devin White, I've never been a big fan of his. I don't think that's some huge loss. William Golston, kind of sucks to lose him as a rotational defensive lineman, but he's replaceable. Ryan Neal wasn't that great for Tampa last year, so I think you can stomach that. But as a whole, they did everything right. They absolutely did everything right. I'm going to give Tampa Bay an A. This is almost as perfect as you could get. If they could have found a way to get Antoine Winfield Jr. on a full-term, long-term extension, this would be an easy A+, but because they were only able to tag him, I'm going to give him an A. That's still one of the higher grades I've given out. I think they've had one of the better off seasons so far. I'm really excited to see how they're going to attack the draft, because that pick in the late 20s for them, or the mid 20s, excuse me, is going to be very, very interesting. But anyways, folks, that's going to do it for this installment of my grading every team 1 week into free agency series. I hope you all enjoyed, and if you did, please make sure to leave a like down below, as it does help out the channel a ton, shows your support, shows you care. I really appreciate it. And also make sure to subscribe, because if I haven't covered your team yet, you won't want to miss when I do. And if I have covered your team already, go ahead and subscribe anyways, because we've got more great NFL content coming your way all the way throughout the offseason, into the regular season, and beyond. We're going to be talking about the draft. We're going to be talking about all the teams again after the draft. I'm going to be talking about all the teams again throughout the summer, mixed in with some film breakdowns and whatnot. You definitely won't want to miss that. Let me know down in the comments below what you thought about my grades for these teams. Was I a little too high on some players? Was I a little too low? Was I too harsh? Was I too kind? Anything in between? Please let me know down in the comments what you think. I'd love to sit and chat with you about what's going on around the league. But with all that being said, I hope you enjoyed. And to everyone out there watching, I hope you all have a wonderful day, evening, night, afternoon, whatever time of day it is for you. I hope you enjoy it, because you're all wonderful people and you deserve it.